Now, recently you appeared at our Contenders event, and in the write-up of that, there were some comments. And I just saw this comment, and I have to read it because you're a writer. So we have Barbara suggesting that you have to do another series of this. And here's, yes, we need more. Daisy and Billy need to spend time together, discussing their lives, recapturing their feelings, thinking about what might have been. They start writing songs, get the band together for a reunion album and tour. The group talks about how their lives have gone. We need to see the journey of these characters, etc. We need to know who kept in touch with who other than Warren and Daisy and Billy and Graham. We need to see Karen tell Graham she lied. It's always been him. Eddie needs to make peace with his bandmates. Billy needs to deal with Daisy being, and this goes on and on.
Wow.
This is really, she's written this for you.
I'm going to need Barbara's email address after this so we can get some ideas.
I've never seen a comment like that. They're usually snarky and, you know.
That's amazing. We
Yeah.
always said that we were going to answer all the questions, but then ask some more questions on the way out the door. And
Exactly.
You know, that's the game.
Which could be the way. Then the only other comment said, it was perfect. We don't need any more. So, you know, you can never win.
It's just more practical with the costume changes.
Or you could wear less costumes.
A private dressing room isn't that much to ask for.
Then I want a separate green room.
For what?
For those of us who aren't going to use before every show, Daisy.
That's you, so you want a private green room just for you.
Managing the Six had somehow become the hottest gig in town. Billy never forgot what I'd done for him back in '71, so when he called me up, I jumped at the chance.
I don't know if you heard, but I'm married now, so I'd like a suite for all these overnights.
Well, I'm married too.
Your wife's not coming on tour.
Not the whole time, but I'm sorry. If she gets a suite, I got a suite too.
On a separate floor.
Oh, even better.
Why not get separate buses while you're at it?
Can we
Is
do
that possible?
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Welcome to Behind the Lens. Today, you might have heard of a few of these movies: The Disaster Artist, 500 Days of Summer, The Spectacular Now, The Fault in Our Stars, Rosaline, Our Souls at Night, Paper Towns, Pink Panther 2 even. Oh my God. And guess what they all have in common? This guy right here, Scott Neustadter. Welcome to Behind the Lens.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, you are what I call a very prolific screenwriter.
It's amazing when they get made, I'll tell you.
And it's not easy. I mean, I know some writers that just make a living off of development and never see those films come to fruition.
It's true. I don't. The ones that we're certain after we finish them are going to get made are never the ones that get made, and all the ones that are like, this is a wild card, somehow have found their way through, which is bizarre.
It is, and it's quite a list, and some of these very successful box office hits as well, Oscar-nominated scripts, all of that. Is this what you always wanted to do?
You know, I think it is what I've always wanted to do. I just never really thought that I had the ability or the talent. And so when I started, I was going to go into the other side of it. I went into development, and I was an intern for a bunch of different movie companies in college, and I got into doing coverage and script reading, and was lucky enough to get hired to work at Tribeca Productions after I graduated.
Yeah.
And I worked there, and I became the director of development, and I loved being on that side of it. But the more scripts I read, the more I realized that I really wanted to write. And that maybe the bar was a little lower than I had thought it was.
Because you've read these other
Because
scripts.
I was reading so many scripts.
I can do that.
It's definitely trying to emulate your heroes was impossible and would never happen. But trying to emulate the script that sold this week that you couldn't believe someone had written, that was an easier challenge.
That was easy. So that inspired you.
Yeah.
And then what did you do? Did you write spec scripts or?
So yeah, my writing partner, Michael Weber, he was De Niro's assistant at the time. So I worked in the development side, and he was working on the De Niro side, and we didn't work very hard. And so we would go up to the roof or at lunch, and we would just kind of spitball ideas, and together we finished our first ever script.
Yeah.
I think he had probably written a lot of half scripts, and I'd written a lot of first acts, but this was the first one we ever finished. And it was a silly comedy that definitely doesn't represent our voice in any way, but it was amazing that we finished something. And then, long story short, nothing happened. I left the business. I went to grad school in England to get a real job and leave the movie stuff behind. And then the minute I got there, I met a girl that I then turned into 500 Days of Summer. And that's the script that kind of brought us back in and turned us into actual screenwriters.
Wow. And so that inspired 500 Days of Summer, and
Yeah.
that became really a breakthrough. But you've had so many, and a lot of them dealing with younger people, in the indie film
I'm
world.
quite immature, and I think I just sort of gravitate to those stories.
Well,
still.
sometimes you write something and then they want to type you,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. No, everything, I always think YA is just a marketing thing.
Right.
Because coming of age stories, you can be any age. And
Yeah.
we've written a handful of adult coming of age stories. And The Disaster Artist is not really a YA, but it is a relationship.
Right.
And those are the things we just kind of love.
So you did the adaptation of The Fault in Our Stars. I'm just curious about that. It was a huge YA book,
Yes.
gigantic. I mean, so much pressure on you as screenwriters not to screw this up.
It's true. At the time when we were reading it, I think it had just been published and hadn't yet kind of become the phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so there was not a lot of expectation when we got the job.
Oh, fortunately.
And then wrote that script really quickly just because I love that novel so much and it just came easy to us. And then it became a thing. And then all of a sudden people were, tweeting, you better have this line in there because I have it tattooed on my body. And you were like, oh no, it's not. And that became pretty stressful. But it was good preparation for Daisy Jones, where that also took off and there are a lot of passionate fans out there about.
Yeah, and you have to do that. And now you're working in the air of the internet that dictates so much stuff before you've even written a word.
It's true. And in a way, it's helpful because you know what
Yeah.
fans are looking for and you know what's important to them. And
Right.
we've always kind of asked the author, you know your fans better than anybody. Tell us what are the things that are must-haves in our adaptations. And that's been very helpful. But now you almost don't even need that because people will tell you.
Is there a movie you'd like to remake of somebody else's?
Probably not.
Yeah.
The remakes of things that are perfect, I would never want to touch.
Yes.
And remakes of things that are broken, I probably also would never want to touch. So I don't, I've never really think about that.
Well, I heard The Graduate is your favorite.
Graduate is my sort of be-all, end-all piece of art in the
So
world.
you would never touch
I
that.
would not even. If I heard that someone was touching it, I would find out where they live, and I would ring the doorbell and be like, "Please don't."
Why is that a template for you of what a good screenplay is?
That's a great question. I saw it when I was 17, and it hit me in this moment of like, finally sort of seeing myself in a movie.
Mhm.
And I think I'd always kind of gravitated towards those kinds of movies. I remember seeing Dead Poet Society when I was 13 and being like, I just have to do something with movies, and I don't know what it is. But my friends were all into Star Wars and other things, and that was never kind of my jam.
Right.
And so I always gravitated towards these kinds of stories. And The Graduate was such just a monumental thing that I saw. And part of it was the music, the way that Mike Nichols was using music, and all of it is just sort of in the DNA of the things that I love.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't really explain it other than that.
Well, the music's very important in Daisy Jones and The Six. Now this is a little different because it's a limited series for television, and there's not a whole lot of that other than Friends with Benefits.
This was really our first ever true foray into TV. We tried it once before, kind of left very early on in the usual creative difference place. But this one we spearheaded and just was very passionate about and wanted to see all the way through to the end.
Right.
And I was just very involved in a lot of things that usually when you're writing a screenplay, you turn it in. If the director likes you, he'll invite you to set, but oftentimes it's just see you at the premiere. And this was a completely different animal.
Yeah, you're a producer too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's all important to, keep the work that you've written the way you want to see it on the screen.
Sure. And in this particular case, my wife was the boss, and so that I wasn't too worried about having to take it
Lauren
away.
Neustadter actually is with Reese Witherspoon at Hello Sunshine, which has become the go-to company. I mean, they are just like gangbusters.
I'm very proud of her. She's the best at her job. I'm glad everyone is finally seeing it. But yeah,
So why'd she hire you?
Better. Because that's a great question, and I can explain. I'm sure she wouldn't if she had the choice, but she had no choice. I happened to have gotten this book first, and I said to her, I think you're going to love this, and we should do it together. And she was stuck with me.
Ah, and perfect for Hello Sunshine's kind of.
I thought so. Yeah,
shows.
I had had a lunch with Reese Witherspoon, probably after 500 Days, like many years before.
Right.
And she said, "What's your dream project?" And I said, "I don't know, but if I could do anything, it would be something to do with the Fleetwood Mac making the Rumors album."
Oh, wow.
And we spent the rest of the lunch talking about Stevie Nicks and how much we loved her. And so when I got this book, which is definitely has a lot of that in its soul, I said to Lauren, I was like, "You're gonna love this. Reese is gonna love this. We should really partner up and see if we can get the author Taylor to do it with us."
It's amazing. Speaking of Stevie Nicks, before I watched every episode of your series, I saw Stevie Nicks for the very first time live just a few weeks ago at SoFi Stadium with Billy Joel.
Yeah.
And what is she, 70 something? Unbelievable.
Yeah. I mean, so many great songs, and I'm
She's
sure
still got it.
that
Big
show's
time.
terrific.
Yeah. And this, of course, is an homage to that period, I think, of music and that type of a group.
Yeah, I read this book, and it was like just a joy delivery system. I loved every page of it. I love that world so much. I love the music. And when you're reading a book about music, all you can do is imagine it.
Right.
And the idea that we would get to create this for real was just the opportunity of a lifetime for me. I'm such a music nerd,
Yeah.
and it was a really fun, kind of gratifying experience for sure.
Great movies about a rock group that don't star that rock group. So I'm separating the Beatles and people
Right.
like that.
Sure.
Are few and far between. I'm not sure why it's never been that successful. Almost Famous is, but it's really about a guy on the outside looking in.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
On that, it's really not on the inside looking in.
It's not really about, it's about the outsiders, right? It's,
Yeah.
it's about William, it's about Penny Lane, it's about the distance between the rock star and we
Exactly.
thought,
This
wouldn't
is
it be
not
interesting
that.
can you humanize the rock stars themselves? And that was definitely the thing we cared about the most, was just never losing sight of the humanness of them, even when
Right.
they're up there and everybody's looking at them on a pedestal. They grew up and they were just like you before they weren't, or were they? And I feel like that's an interesting thing to sort of examine.
Yeah, it is fascinating to watch. It really works as a limited series because it just like each is self-contained in its own way, but then you're going on and you're so immediately invested in these relationships as they move along in different ways.
Thank you. Yeah, that was definitely the goal. I loved that there would be an opportunity to do one episode just about the songwriting,
Right.
and one episode just about the recording of an album, and then they're on tour. And like you said, the ending is so important that I didn't want to stretch this out several seasons because I felt like you have to land that plane in an emotional way, and that's the final episode is just super crucial for the success, I think, of this particular series.
I was particularly struck by the structure of it, the way you brought everyone into it with them doing interviews 20 years later.
Yeah, so the novel is written as an oral history. So it's
Mhm.
basically told through interviews. Everyone has gathered for the first time in many years. In the novel, it's actually they're in it's present day, so they're in their 70s, and they're looking back on this time in their life, and they haven't spoken in a long time. And there's a lot of drama about why and what happened, and that really sucks you in. So I wanted to keep that structure in the show,
Right.
and it felt like a pretty easy shift to just make it this kind of a interview, like a documentary behind the music type thing. And so there's still, that the information is being filtered through memory,
Yeah.
but when we actually cut to the scenes and the moments back then, which the book doesn't have, the book can be more ambiguous than I think we can be.
Right.
When we show you the scene that they're referring to, you're seeing what actually happened, not someone's version of what happened.
Exactly, but it's fascinating. It really builds suspense because as I'm watching it, you're really going like, no, wait a minute, she's talking there. So what happened here and how did that work out? And then we find, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give away everything here,
Right.
but we find out little twists and turns here of using that device and who's being interviewed and what happened.
Right. Maybe they're not telling the full truth and
Right.
and why that is. And
Yeah.
I thought all of that was just really important to use in the adaptation.
So in the casting, you did not cast singers necessarily here. Isn't that a huge gamble?
It is a huge gamble. Initially, we were gonna only cast musicians and teach them to act, and
Right.
that would have been a disaster. But the first person to raise her hand was Riley Keough, and Riley came in, and Riley says, I think I'm Daisy, and I have so much about her in my body, and we were like, yep, she's great. And
Of course,
also
Riley Keough is also the granddaughter of Elvis Presley.
Right, we knew that as well.
So when
but
you say in her body, it's definitely real.
Yeah,
here.
for sure. And also such a talented actor, and like we loved her work in The Girlfriend Experience and
American Honey.
So good.
I know.
But she said, just so you know, I have no musical ability, zero. I barely sing in the shower. We can't do it.
That's astounding considering her mother, Lisa Marie, as well.
Right, yeah, no. I mean, I always say like my grandmother plays the piano, but like I can't, I didn't get any of that. So we put Riley in front of a microphone with our music directors, and she had never done that before, and I'm sure it's a very intimidating experience. And they said, belt, go, let me hear you sing. And she sang for them, and they called us and they said, it's not classically trained. She doesn't really know where to position, but there's something in her that is incredible, and we're going to bring it out. And after that, we said, well, then we can do that all the time. We can do that with everybody. We don't have to just hire musicians.
And that was sort of Daisy too. You know, what's that character?
Yeah, Tony Berg always used to say to us that he's our music director. And he said that it's not really, you don't want the perfect voice.
Right.
The great rock voice has a little flaws in it, and that's what gives it personality. So we ran with that.
And then Sam Claflin.
And Sam was the last person that we cast.
Yeah.
We had met with so many potential Billies, and all of them kind of checked 4 of the 5 boxes, but it's such a hard character to kind of play.
So
and Sam came in, and he was just incredible. And Sam, we knew we were going to have to do some movie magic with his music. He had never really played the guitar.
Right.
His singing was more almost Broadway, and we'd have to knock that out of him.
Yeah.
But COVID happened, and they had 18 extra months that they didn't expect to practice and to really get into it. And Sam is like, when he has to learn something, you've never seen anybody work harder. And it was the most impressive thing to witness, that by the time we were able to roll cameras, like all of them were doing it themselves. They sounded incredible. Sam had spent a lot of time listening to Blake Mills's voice. Blake wrote a lot of these songs, and he would record his own voice, and Sam would imitate it. In a way that you would as an actor if you were on the British stage, and he killed it, and we could not believe it.
It was great, and they're a great group, so great, and I got this, and thank you, Amazon. This arrived in the mail. This is the album.
It's the real album.
So this is a television show that you did that has now sparked a smash hit kind of group.
Yeah, the first ever #1 album by a fictional band.
Right, since the Monkees.
Yeah. No, I think the Monkees have a single or two, but they definitely don't have a record.
They didn't have the album.
They don't have an LP that ever hit the top.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
Well, that begs the question, will there be more? Because, I mean, you mentioned you like The Graduate. It's one of the all-time great endings I've ever seen in a movie.
Agreed.
Because you can still talk about it now. It was, 1967? You can still talk about that and interpret it.
I feel like it had quite an influence on me. If you've ever watched anything I've ever done, they all end that way.
You don't have a pure ending that we all know what happened.
500 Days, Spectacular Now. People were saying that they thought that the end of Daisy reminded them of the end of How I Met Your Mother. I've never seen the finale of How I Met Your Mother, but Spectacular Now is the exact same moment, and 500 has a version of that, and they're all kind of me trying to do the end of The Graduate, because I just love hopeful endings. I hate happy endings. I'm allergic to happy endings, but the hopeful ending, the one that if you're an optimist, you feel like, okay, maybe there's a chance for good things to happen to them, but you don't see it. Right. Those are the ones that I just really gravitate towards. So what do you do next? Do you want to continue this form? Because limited series is really the most interesting area of television right now. Yeah, and I think the limited series for my writing partner and I, who love to do book adaptations, oftentimes we read a novel and we're like, I don't know what the 2-hour version of this is. It's going to very shortchange all of the great stuff. Right. It has such a beautiful 3 acts that it doesn't feel like a series that should run forever, but we could generate an amazing 6 to 8 hours of content out of this novel. Yeah. That didn't used to be a thing, and now that it's a thing, I feel like some of the better books in the world really lend themselves to this format, and I hope they keep making them. Well, congratulations on this and all of this. It's amazing
body of work so far, with more to come. Scott Neustadter, thanks for joining me on Behind the Lens.
Thanks for having me. This was great.